Welcome back to Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. I'm taking a deep breath now because I recognize this topic. Um, it's going to be a little controversial. It's going to challenge some ways that you think about relationship and marriage. It's going to challenge the disconnect that we're seeing in relationships. It's going to challenge the uh, minimalize commitments to relationship. We'll address the word submission and what that actually looks like in a relationship, and so on and so forth. But I want to read a quote to you as we jump into this segment. It says, "Love is a feeling, but marriage is a decision. Feelings fluctuate, values should anchor the relationship." And when I first read that quote, I thought about the various couples that I see in therapy who are struggling at the 5 year, 10 year, 15, 20, 25 year mark. And I often have to ask them questions like, who taught you how to be in a relationship? I also ask them questions such as, did you all have discussions on expectations and roles and standards and things of that nature, or were you just really led by the butterfly feeling, the idea that society said you have to be married, um, and the pressures that come along with it? Marriage used to be considered the pinnacle, the rising of adulthood. You know, it was taught to girls very early on that you have to get married and have children and run a household, and all the man has to do is to go out and go to work and to financially provide. Everybody's not striving for that aspect of marriage anymore because back then, marriage really was an opportunity for survival. It was an opportunity to have property, um, to activate alliances and stability. I talked to quite a few couples who had some really, really tough childhoods that marriage was their only way out. I talked to a young lady who intentionally got pregnant very early because that was the only way that she would be able to escape the abuse of her father, was to get pregnant and get married and to leave home. So is it really about love or is it about survival? Right now, um, when we think about marriage and we think about how it should look based on what society says, is that there's a hierarchy, a male hierarchy, then the woman, then the children, so on and so forth. However, as life continues to evolve, things have evolved, and where men were once the primary financial provider, women are out earning men in a lot of different ways. And so that creates a different level of dynamics in the marriage. However, over time, especially in this 20th century, that need for survival and stability and alliances has waned. It has kind of pulled away from what marriage looked like. I saw a lady make a post and she said that they were celebrating 35 years of marriage and they didn't need any counseling, they just need God. Okay, I got that. I got that. And I'm certainly not coming against that, saying that you don't need God in marriage. But I'm going to say this. I done seen a lot of folks that's got God or supposed to have God wrapped up in their marriage, and they got the messiest marriage. They mistreat one another. They handle each other with indifference, partly because when they got into their marital bond, they had some, I won't say flawed ideas about marriage, but they had some unlearned or needed to be relearned ideas about what marriage is. See, back in the 20s and even before that, a wife was a possession. it wasn't a individuality. There was no autonomy for women in marriage. It was strictly survival. There were a lot of people that got married that didn't even like the person that they got married to, or even if they were given to the person in marriage, they didn't necessarily like that person. They had to survive. And we're living in a different state where women are surviving differently without matrimony. And I think that that is creating some disconnect, because there are some men who say they want the old school relationship, and they usually throw the word submission out there. But those men that are throwing that term submission and being the man and all of that, their leadership skills and their provision or provider skills are lacking. They don't have them. And so they don't create a level of stability. The other thing that I want you to think about is, in these arranged or survivalist marriages, there was a lot of infidelity going on. And the wives knew that. But they also knew that they had to, at that time, accept the infidelity, as it came across. I almost said something, I'm gonna bite my tongue on it. They had to accept the infidelity that they faced. They had to deal with being the laughing stock, because they were in situations where their fear of not being able to survive kept them in unhealthy relationships. I talked to someone, a client, who found out at the ending or the transition of their father's life that he had a whole nother family. And they couldn't understand why their mother didn't mourn the loss of their dad. Well, she had been in mourning the entire marriage, mourning the love, mourning the care, mourning the concern that he was supposed to show her. And instead, what she ended up doing was having him dividing his time between the known family and the unknown family, keeping this woman held hostage in a marriage and an unhappiness, partly because there was a fear: if I leave, what am I going to do? He's been the provider, he's been the caretaker, he's a man, I'm a woman. And when you devalue those gender roles, you can find people getting stuck in situations or relationships that aren't healthy. And so as marriage goes on, a lot of people get married in, 19, 20, 25. Some maybe even make it to 30 before they get married. And they get married and they have this idea, or somewhat of an idea, of what they believe marriage is. What I'm finding, though, is most people have not had the privilege of seeing a healthy relationship or a healthy marriage, or something that they could mimic from. When I think about, like, my grandparents, my paternal grandparents getting married, my grandfather was a couple of decades older than my grandmother. He had a little money, he had animals and things of that nature, and he literally bought my grandmother by exchanging her for what her family needed, was an animal at that time. She was a young girl being forced to marry an old man who had already been married before, who lost his wife to illness. And now this young girl was going to have to be in this marriage to this older man that didn't oftentimes, and I'm learning, didn't oftentimes see her in the manner of a wife. But sometimes if he spanked the children, he spanked her. What kind of marriage is that? What kind of situation was that to be? Well, again, my granddad was born in 1898. And so a wife was a possession. There was an exchange of property. I'm going to give you this animal, you give me your daughter. So there was not a love connection in the beginning. I would venture to think, or would hope, to a certain degree, that there was a development of love. But I remember my granddad's, final days, where He died in the basement alone thinking about his first wife. My grandmother saying, shut up, old fool. You already at home. So there was still some of that tension there out of forced marriage. Now, I know we would all love to have these Cinderella stories of people being married 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years and never having an issue and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But we're in a time now where women have learned their value. And in learning their value, there are some men that feel insecure about their value. And so here comes things like the narcissist who gaslights women. I saw a video and it was quite disturbing. I saw a video on TikTok where there was this male. I won't call him a gentleman because that's not what he was depicting. This male was on there and he was saying, hey, y'all, ladies, just because we introduce you to our families, just because we give you nicknames like boo and all that kind of stuff, we don't want to marry you. We're not going to marry you. So don't keep looking for labels in marriage because that's not what we want. We just, want you to hang around and just be chill. Well, those statements are defining how he has no respect for her value. And subsequently, she may not have respect for her own value. And so that's tolerable. I remember moving to Georgia with my daughter's father. And coming to Georgia, it was just this thing where women didn't mind sharing a man. And because I would not be part of a brothel, I wouldn't be a part of, you having 4 and 5 different women. I chose to be single and raising my kids alone while you were out hitting up every woman that you wanted to hit up. I could not demean myself and my value. Was it a struggle being a single mother? Absolutely. Could he have done better or could they have done better as fathers? Absolutely. Was that going to stop me from loving and providing for my children? Absolutely not. But I was not going to disown my value. Now, I will say this. I did for a moment. I did twice. I got married twice under the umbrella of the church. And being told that I could not operate in the church or do the things that I was anointed to do and appointed to do because I wasn't married and it would look like I was a Jezebel. I entered 2 horrible marriages that both I should have just ran away from, but I was so consumed by societal pressure, wanting to do things the Christian way, and I suffered in those marriages. My children suffered in those marriages because there was so much emotional dysfunction in the marriages. There was so much abuse. Who would want that for themselves or for their children? We are suddenly in a space where we moved marriage from survival and stability, partnerships, alliances, and property to a space where we're expecting our significant other or our spouse to be our best friend, our lover, the financial partner, the emotional support system, co-parenting, dream chaser, and all that wrapped up in one, which can happen. It's a lot of pressure. But the problem with it is most people don't ask questions to identify what the mentality is that that person has about relationships, about being in marriage. Are you in a situation where you have this ideal of being this dutiful wife? I'm going to cook, I'm going to clean, I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to raise the children, I'm going to keep a happy home, and I'm going to go to work. That's all fine and good. But what we're finding out now is women that have created that standard in their life as their children have gotten older and more independent, as the household has evolved, as they have evolved whether they've evolved naturally because of age or through situations like illness and things of that nature, they are regretting having given up their identity and putting themselves on the back burner while they gave their husband the space to go to work and come home. That's all he had to do, was go to work and come home. There was no co-parenting, no co-cooking. There's no co-working it out. If mom runs into a situation and dad is the one that's bringing the money home, he gonna throw you the dollars to pay whatever you pay, and then you're gonna have to make it work. And then you get frustrated as time has gone on, saying, what happened? Well, let's talk about what that disconnect is. The disconnect begins when there isn't an identity of expectation and standard in relationship. I've had multiple couples that I've spoken to whose parents lived a long life and were married a long time, but as they began to dissect what marriage looked like, they recognized that both of their parents were very unhappy. And they were just going through the motion of being married, one, because it was familiar, two, because it was where stability was, and three, the fear of branching out on your own. That can happen with men too. Some men become so consumed with being in a relationship because they have fear of being alone that they will end up in relationship with toxic women that will mentally, physically, and financially abuse them as well. When you discuss the disconnect, you have to understand, are there roles or are the gender roles changing? There are going to be situations where there are stay-at-home dad because moms make more money. There are situations where there's the same sex relationships in the household. What is that going to look like? What is the expectation of that going to look like? Some of those traditional roles of men being their provider, and when the woman decides, well, you know what? I'm working 40 hours like you. I'm bringing this amount of income in like you, but yet I'm still doing all the laundry. I'm still doing all the cooking. I'm the first name that the children call when they don't feel well. I'm the one that the teachers call, the whole 9 yards, and you get the opportunity to come home and chill. I'm still trying to figure out why people think that's cool. Why do you think that it's cool that your significant other is going out and working and helping to keep the household functioning, and yet you want to have this patriarchal idea of, I'm a leader, do as I say, not as I do? Well, here's what the reality is. You want me to do as you say, but you also want me to pay half the bills. That's a roommate situation. That ain't marriage, right? Now, it's cool that households, because I don't know really any household that can operate solely on one single income nowadays because of the cost of living, expenses, and things of that nature. However, if either spouse is going to go to work, then either spouse needs to partake in the 50% that it takes to run the household. It should not fall just on one person. That is unfair. So what I'm finding is a lot of women are saying, I want my freedom papers. And a lot of men are saying, I don't know what's wrong with you. Everything has been working fine. Why all of a sudden a change? Well, there was evolution. There was a mindset of, I'm just tired. I'm doing it all. I have to think for everyone. I have to put things in place. The kids aren't going to run to you first. They're going to run to me for a solution. I don't even have time for me. So they get tired and they get frustrated at what the relationship is like now versus what it was like in the beginning. In the beginning, women, and I know All girls don't get this same lesson, but a lot of girls are told, to nurture the household, make it safe for everyone, put everyone, your children, your husband, and everybody before you, and all those kind of things. But it doesn't work for long-term sustainability because you get tired and you don't have really good outlets because other people that you are friending also have some of the same issues that you're experiencing. So y'all can't talk about it. And there's no way to go around it because now here comes the shunning. Oh, you should just be able to do that because you're the woman and this is what we was created for and the Bible says this and the Bible says that. Well, here's one thing that people don't recognize that the Bible says. They always throw the scripture out about, wives, submit to your husband as he submits to God. But they forget that next scripture that says, husbands, submit to your wives. That means that we have duality. That means we have partnership. That means we have evolution. If you're going to go the biblical route now, what y'all got to do is stop skipping over scriptures to make your case be known versus an equitable case being known. Y'all got to stop doing it. That's abuse. And that's taking advantage of situations. The other thing that creates a disconnect in relationship is unrealistic or unspoken expectations and standards. Right now, social media has you all believing that every relationship is happy-go-lucky, and when you all see these content creators breaking up and really causing harm and wreaking havoc and chaos in each other's life, y'all sit in surprise. Well, why are you surprised? Because none of them are talking about expectations and standards. It's all goosebumps and feelings. It's all this ideology. Oh, I just love this person, you my person, and all this kind of stuff. And they selling y'all these dreams, but nobody's talking about the real truth. Nobody's talking about the real understanding of how much work it takes to have and to perform in a marriage. But the bigger problem is how much work it takes for you to perform within yourself to be ready for a relationship. For all those people that are having these Cinderella dreams or the Disney princess dreams about somebody coming in and on a white horse and lifting them up out of all of these situations, and that happens with men too, so don't get it twisted. When all of these situations occur, nobody's coming in as your hero. They're coming in as your partner. They're coming in bringing an essence of who they are to connect with the essence of who you are. The problem is, even for these marriages that are 25, 30, 35, and 40 years old, you've forgotten the parts of the individual that you accepted in the beginning and that you're finding that you didn't like. I've seen marriages where people were, tolerable in the beginning of little snide remarks or little hits about how somebody may look and their lack of this or lack of that. And then as it evolves, it becomes a thorn in their side. I remember when I was married, I'll say this, I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo through and through. I'm a Virgo rising, a Virgo sun, and a Virgo moon. So I'm a Virgo through and through. I'm an organizer. I'm a visionary. So I got married in the second marriage. And in this marriage, the person dreamed of being a pastor, became a pastor, had other dreams. So once you tell me, and we're supposed to be in this committed relationship, that these are your dreams, I'm going to go to work and helping you to realize what your dreams is. That was my mistake because I tried to push someone who believed they had a dream to becoming a visionary and they weren't ready. They desired what they believed was this fame life of being a pastor and this acknowledgement and this recognition, but they didn't have a vision to the point, one of my first books that I wrote 30 years ago, doing all of these speaking engagements and conferences and stuff like that, I was sitting, being introduced, and my skirt was pulled and said, "You make sure you get me in front of the people. You make sure that you introduce me as your pastor. You make sure that I get to talk to the people so that they can see me." Well, you didn't help write a book. You weren't invited to speak, but you had these unrealistic expectations of me trying to support your vision when you didn't support your own vision. You weren't doing anything to make moves. And that's where I'm finding that a lot of relationships are falling apart. There are some people that are coming in with these expectations and standards and desires, and they will express them. However, if you're not open to an engaging conversation to really find out what that person needs, if you're not asking the right questions to make sure that your needs are aligning with their needs, you're going to have that discord. You're going to have that disconnect. It may not be immediately, but it's going to come if you all aren't willing to get back to the table to have real open conversations to identify the truth of what the expectations are. I've seen people that get in marriages, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're taking off. One spouse may be taking off and we're financially climbing ladders and moving and shaking and all that kind of stuff. The other spouse is kind of lackadaisical. They're supporting the dream, but not really supporting the dream. And then jealousy comes in, and then discontent comes in, and then here comes infidelity and insecurity and all those different things. And it's all because there were some unspoken expectations that were being left out. The partner had no idea that they were needed. Then the growth process of each person, one was stunted, one was climbing in growth, and they were disconnecting. I often use this as an example, and I say that two people will come together in marriage, and if you don't find yourself growing like this, you will grow like this, because people will adapt a different identity as they've gotten older. Say, for example, being on a job, and if your job requires you to be a leader, if you don't know how to balance leadership at home and at work, you're going to have a problem, because you'll begin to treat your home like your work, and that's not the place for that. So you may have these unrealistic expectations. Another thing that I'm finding is that there is a fear of vulnerability. A fear of vulnerability is people who walk around carrying unhealed trauma. It could be someone laughed at them in a relationship before, someone broke their heart, someone disappointed them because they had these statements of, identity of what it was that they want. I remember going into the last relationship that I was in, and I went into the relationship saying, these are my needs. I'm not trying to be somebody's layup partner or anything like that. Here's my personal goals, my desires to be in a healthy, strong, committed relationship where we are emotionally mature, emotionally connected, and able to move forward together with our individual visions, our purpose, our mission as a supportive partnership, yada, yada, yada. Laid it down. And the response was, oh yeah, we definitely can do that. That's right up my alley. I want someone that, can support me in vision and purpose, and, I got dreams and yada, 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 yada. We can do it. Okay. And then a switch occurred because they were carrying some unhealed trauma that they were trying to put onto me to walk through a healing. It wasn't my job to take on what someone else had done to them that caused them to have fear of vulnerability, fear of commitment, fear of their own true identity. it made the relationship was good on surface, but in the heart of the relationship, there was constantly a pulling away, to the point where that pulling away led to the separation and the breakup. And it was disheartening because I walked in the door sharing my expectations. So I'm going to say this. When people tell you what they need from you in a relationship, if you know that you cannot provide those needs, if you know that you still have some unhealed processes within you, some unhealed trauma in you, go ahead and let them go. Stop wasting folks' time. Because if you're leaning on someone to help you heal, that has to become a choice of theirs. So you need to be truthful with them. The problem is a lot of people end up in relationships and they miss the component of truth. They miss the importance of being vulnerable, to assessing how you're impacted by past relationships, to really understanding who you are now. One, in a relationship with yourself, and then in a relationship with others. Two, recognizing where your strengths are, where your areas of improvement are, what your level of commitment and consistency in order for you to present your best self in a relationship. Many times in relationships, people pull away because of community pressures, because, it's the village and everybody needs to be in a relationship and all this kind of stuff, but you're entering into situations where you're really not having a voice. It's a lot of comparison. And I'm going to say this, stop comparing the unknown parts of somebody else's relationships. What I've learned throughout my life as a person and as a therapist, you don't know really what's going on behind somebody else's closed doors. You don't know that they're battling with all of these negative challenges, such as verbal abuse, mental and emotional abuse, financial abuse, and all those kind of things, where that person may have low self-esteem, so now they're trying to take down your self-esteem. You don't know what's in their household. So I, encourage you all to not get into that place of comparison. Part of the missing standards and expectations in relationships is having clear communications and values. What I will tell you is this. Mothers, teach your children, especially your sons, how to cook and clean for themselves. That should not be a mode for them to get in a relationship, because they need someone to cook, clean, do their laundry, hold their hand, all those kind of things. Teach your sons about finances. Mothers, fathers, y'all need to show up in your children's lives. Teach your daughters how to be self-sufficient, how to change a tire if need be, how to use a wrench, how to be financially savvy, how to be emotionally secure. When you teach these in a healthy manner, then they're going to bring together or get together with someone with those same healthy attributes that will flourish in a relationship. But when you send your children out into these spaces of dating, and they have this overwhelming need to be seen by someone, this overwhelming need to be validated by people, you are setting them up for battles in relationships they really shouldn't have to go through. Look at some of the lessons that you've learned about relationships and help teach your children. Help teach them that the things that they see and make comparisons to on social media, they're not all of that. You want to get down to the truth. So what you want to do is identify for yourself, am I able to clearly communicate my values, my voice, and my expectations? Am I able to commit beyond just the emotions? There's too many people, the only way that they can communicate is when they're angry, when they're fearful, when they're tired. Learn how to communicate without the emotions. It may be a thing where you have to write a list. I need to say this, this, and this. You may have to write to your significant other saying, I need you to read this before we have a conversation because I feel like you won't hear me. You may have to change how you deliver it. If you're delivering a message and it's always judgment and sarcasm, nobody's listening to that. Everybody, I know I hear a lot of men saying women don't like to take accountability. People don't like to take accountability, women and men. When you take on accountability, you have to own your actions. A lot of people will get into the blame game where you did this or you did that instead of taking on the accountability for their own actions. You taking on accountability should not be the time where you're always pointing out the other person's flaws, because they should be taking on accountability for themselves. They should be able to stand up and own where they are in their own stuff. You should also too. But you have to stand up in accountability. If you made a mistake, say, I made a mistake. And then this is what I'm going to do to change it. Now, let me say this to all the apologists. You know, the ones that's always apologizing for I apologize. Y'all apologizing don't mean nothing if your actions to change aren't in place. If you're not going to intentionally change your actions, your behaviors, your thoughts, or your movement, you might as well stop wasting your time apologizing because it don't mean anything. I learned very early in my life that my word is my highest value. If I can't stand on my own word with me, I definitely can't stand on my own word with others, and I have no value. If your words and your actions aren't guiding you to do better, you're just apologizing for nothing. Now, there's always hope in recreating a healthy relationship. It has to start in identifying you in the relationship. Right now, social media, especially in the Black community, has this battle that continues to play out with women saying, I just don't want to be in a relationship. Men saying, just come over here and submit, do what I say to do, and you're going to be just fine. Nobody wants to enter into a relationship under that guise. It has to be identified as an intentional partnership with levels of commitment, understanding, and expectations. You want to be able to define the expectations that you have for yourself before you enter into a relationship. When you fall out of a relationship, I encourage you, take 3 to 6 months. Identify what you need to heal. And I know that seems like a really long time, 3 to 6 months or whatever. Listen, whoever is for you is going to be for you. You're going to attract them because you're going to be changing your mindset to a healthy outlook on relationships and being with the right person. But take some time to heal. Y'all keep ripping Band-Aids off on these wounds and then bleeding on somebody else and saying, cure me. Be my nurse, be my doctor, be my lawyer, be my therapist. That is unfair to that other person because they may have done the work. Your responses to their questions may make them believe that they've done the work, but y'all just lying. You hadn't done the work. You got to be willing to do the work. You also have to practice radical honesty. Well, what exactly is radical honesty? Radical honesty is being true and authentic in who you are. I am not talking about being mean and abrupt and aggressive. I am talking about living in authenticity and your truth. You've got to decide what that is for you and being honest with yourself. If you lie to yourself, you're going to lie to these folks. It's just real simple. If you lie to yourself, you're going to lie to the people in your life. Another reason, another example of things that you can do to get to a healthy relationship, choose to heal together. All of the things that I've talked about before can have healing components. You can definitely have a successful and happy marriage, but you all have to choose to heal together, work together, create a vision, a standard, an expectation in the marriage. Create ground rules when you all have disagreements, because disagreements are going to come. Create those ground rules where each person's voice has been heard, where they feel understood, where they feel appreciated. Give yourself the permission to say, I deserve a healthy relationship with me than a healthy relationship with my significant other. But you got to be willing to do the work. What I would encourage is that you all really don't buy into all of the disconnect stuff in social media. Understand what submission is, understand what relationship is, understand what partnership is. Get an understanding of your vision. What's your vision for a relationship? Where are you all going? What are you all doing? Understand the purpose of the relationship. Understand how you all can support one another. I would say affirm that your marriage is 100% doable with all of you putting all of you into the marriage. However, you're also prioritizing yourself. You're prioritizing your need for rest and relaxation. You're prioritizing your need for exploring your own vision and your purpose. And then you come back together so that you can prioritize the marriage. But when you don't make yourself the priority in your own life, you will continue to go to the back of the line, burn out, become frustrated, find yourself 25, 30 years in and trying to discover who you are. I hope that this this message resonates with you all to really understand and own a healthy relationship. I didn't go as hard as I really want to, because I am looking to try to have a panel discussion where we can talk about the ins and outs of marriage. So I'm working on putting that together. But I want to remind you to always stay authentic, always stay focused, identify your own expectations for your life and your standards, and always be authentically peculiar. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Authentically Peculiar. You can head over to marciabrain.com and subscribe so that you can get your weekly newsletter. Run over to YouTube or Spotify, wherever you listen to the podcast at, and subscribe so you can get the notifications on the next ones. I look forward to you purchasing books and all those other things, and continually supporting Authentically Peculiar with Marcia. Take good care and have a beautiful day.